The humanitarian breakdown continues in the Gaza Strip. Per the New York Times, during the overnight hours on Sunday, Israeli forces conducted a raid on the only functioning hospital in northern Gaza, as reported by Gaza's health ministry and hospital authorities. Numerous medical staff members were briefly detained in the operation. After a 3-hour period of detention, Israel released 21 medical staff members from Al Awada Hospital, as indicated in a statement by the Al Awada Health and Community Association, the organization overseeing the hospital. The statement mentioned that Dr. Ahmed Muhanna, the hospital's director, continued to be held in Israeli custody. And on Saturday, Israeli forces entered and utilized bulldozers to demolish sections of Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza. A video uploaded by Al Jazeera videographer and reporter Anas al-Sharif indicates that this action resulted in the tragic deaths of numerous patients and injured displaced Palestinians. The footage suggests that the courtyard housing tents set up by refugees were intentionally bulldozed by Israeli forces, leaving little opportunity for people to evacuate. Here is some of that video.
والله يا جماعة نفسنا احنا ما نورجيكمش ايش بصير بس مجبرين. الجريمة هن كبيرة، الجريمة كبيرة جدا داخل مستشفى كمال عدوان. انسحبت وتراجعت قوات الاحتلال من داخل هذه المستشفى. لكن أتينا إلى المكان لكن تفاجأنا مما حدث. جماعة هذه الجريمة التي ارتكبها الاحتلال بحق مستشفى كمال عدوان.
This comes as Human Rights Watch on Monday accused Israel of using starvation of civilians as a weapon in its war in Gaza against Hamas by blocking deliveries of food, water, and fuel, and by impeding humanitarian access. The group said Israel's actions could constitute a war crime. The organization cited statements by senior Israeli leaders to support its claim that depriving Gazans of necessities was a policy implemented by the country's armed forces. An Israeli government spokesperson, Elan Levy, rejected the report as, quote, a lie, and blamed Hamas for hijacking aid intended for civilians in Gaza.
More information has come out on an incident in which Israeli forces accidentally shot and killed their own hostages. Let's watch this exchange.
In other cases, where the people that are being shot dead are not in fact Israeli hostages, but are in fact Palestinians, has it until now been IDF policy to shoot dead people who are clearly civilians that are Palestinians because they are Palestinians?
As you said, incidences like this are clearly violations of rules of engagement. Our forces have a very clear mission to distinguish between civilians and between combatants. Hamas tries to make that as difficult as possible.
Not in this case. Not in this case. The firefight was, this is the IDF saying this, the firefight was over, these 3 men were left behind. So just answer my question. Were they shot because the IDF thought that they were Palestinian civilians? Is that what happened?
The IDF is investigating the incident. I can't comment on it. This was clearly an awful, awful mistake.
Now, Israelis hit the streets in protest after news of how the IDF killed hostages came to light. And there has been some follow-up. Reuters reported yesterday that signs reading SOS and Help 3 hostages in Hebrew were found on the walls of the building about 200 meters from where the hostages were shot. It also came out that they had taken their tops off in order to presumably demonstrate that they were not armed. And yet
they were waving a makeshift white flag. Yeah, it's absolutely horrible. I mean, can you imagine being held captive for a period of weeks, potentially escaping, or being let go, or somehow getting away from that situation, all the stress and pain of that, only to at the very last minute when you should be rescued to be killed by the armed forces of your own side. I'm glad that the Israeli forces have admitted that this was a terrible, terrible mistake, and there should be consequences for it, because one of the goals, in addition to eliminating Hamas, has to be to recover the hostages, and it's just very bad, and there needs to be accountability for it.
Yeah, I mean, the implications of what happened, I think, regrettably, are even broader than the immediate tragedy of those 3 hostages being killed in that way. And we saw it in the hours and day or so after the news first broke. There were a number of people who came forward saying, well, this is a tragedy, obviously, but it happened because Hamas doesn't wear uniforms. Or it happens because I think Bethany Mandel did a tweet where she said, well, you have to keep in mind that Hamas often transports gets around by dressing women as women in hijab. So that I guess if you connect the dots is the reason why it might make sense to shoot, I guess, at women in hijab. But if you play any of that out, what you're basically arguing is that this is a justification for shooting Palestinian innocents at any time. If someone looks like a civilian, then they could be a terrorist, so I guess it's okay to shoot them, which leads one to some certain conclusions about why there might be so many civilian deaths, not just in the wake of the October 7th crisis, but generally speaking, hundreds of Palestinians that are shot by the IDF each year.
Right. I mean, I don't think that should be counted as justification just because your task is difficult, and it is difficult. It is true that Hamas is embedded within a very dense civilian population, and it is only with great difficulty that they're being hunted down. That is reality. That does not mean that one has license to just start shooting people at random or to shoot first, ask questions later. Obviously, that puts Israeli hostages' lives in danger, in addition to the Palestinian people, in addition to Christian Palestinians in the region who we've talked about being killed inadvertently in their churches, the relatives of former Representative Justin Amash. This is not a casualty rate, a civilian casualty rate that is acceptable to the U.S. or international standards. That said, it is difficult because they are trying to root out a terrorist organization that is embedded in a densely populated civilian areas, and they have the will to continue it until that terrorist group is totally destroyed or gives up, which I guess they have no intention of doing.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard from Israeli military officers or from American military officers that both kind of point to the impossibility of ever rooting out Hamas. And so at a certain point, when you have your military experts saying, well, that's not possible, absent killing everybody in the area, killing all 2.3 million Palestinians who live in Gaza, then at a certain point, that becomes a pretext for doing what in the alternative. And when you see Israeli developers putting out plans for resorts and housing in Gaza, when you see people putting up, IDF members putting up Israeli flags and hanging banners and posting menorahs in a way that I think if we imagine it being reversed, if a Muslim occupying force went into a Jewish settlement, a Jewish neighborhood, and started putting up religious symbols for their own religion, we would see that as inappropriate and in a kind of conquering gesture as opposed to any principled desire to root out terrorism. It starts to be, I think, more and more difficult to defend, and I think that's what the public relations battle that Biden is struggling with right now is really all about.
Yeah, although, I mean, that conquest is occurring and about to occur, and the, frankly, only way to stave it off is for Hamas, which is the governing authority of the region, to give up, right? That would be the easiest way to save tens of thousands of additional innocent lives in the region. So, I mean, in the way that warfare goes, they're committed to continuing the war until that objective is completed. And if that comes at the expense, I'm not endorsing that, but that is what they're going to do.
Well, I would disagree. I think that even Israel can't get away on an international stage with killing 2.3 million Gazans. And so the question is, what can they get away with before there are significant international consequences for them? And it's a little bit of a game of chicken that's being played now. Moreover, and I know that we disagree about this, But the point of the matter is that the weapons that Israel is using in Gaza are American weapons. And so America is in a unique position of having a great deal of influence over Israel's ongoing behavior here.
I would cut that off right now. I would cut that off regardless of the situation, because it's not our job to favor other countries' defenses.
So again, it comes down to what Biden is willing to do and how much political capital he's willing to extend on a country that is not even going along with his stated policy goals, which is a two-state solution. Benjamin Netanyahu, of course, is going around saying that you can count on me to thwart a two-state solution. It will never happen under me. Palestinians will never have their own state. At what point is Biden going to stop providing diplomatic cover for someone who is going so clearly against his own stated policy goals?
Well, but in a way we're providing pressure for the war to end, because we're helping to arm one side to eventually win the war by conquering the area. So, we are
by conquering. The area's
by eliminating
the area was conquered
enemy
already.
government.
It was already
but it's
it's
occupied by an enemy force to Israel, and again, they're going to continue until they're defeated.
All right, stick around. We're rising right after this.